Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome the members of council, staff, and members of the public to discuss the 2025 draft budget and call this meeting to order. Now, this meeting is a public information session held for the purpose of public engagement on basically the budget before you tonight. During this public information session, no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter in any way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council. At this time, I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson for the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Worship. We acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. The town of Petrolia is located on lands associated with the Huron Tract Treaty, number 29 of 1827. We express gratitude for the lands where we live, work, and play, and we are committed to working respectfully with the land and the Indigenous peoples who have called this land home.
Thank you. Purpose of the meeting is to afford the public an opportunity to receive information relating to the town of Petrolia's 2025 draft budget and provide input to town staff and council. This meeting is specific to the town of Petrolia 2025 draft budget. Any unrelated comments shall not be brought forward at this meeting. Public wishing to address council on or another topic are most welcome. This can be done by contacting the clerk's office for inclusion with the next council meeting agenda. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the council present. On my left, your right, we have Councillor Hyatt, Deputy Mayor Field. Further down is Councillor O'Hara and Councillor Clark. And I'm Brad Loosely, Mayor. At this time, I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson to introduce the staff present, please.
Thank you. And we will go clockwise with our Director of Operations, Mr. Mike Thompson, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facility, Mrs. Julie Bullock, our Deputy Treasurer and Finance Manager, Ms. Annette Strand, our Director of Marketing, Arts, and Communications, Ms. Larissa Ellsworth, our Deputy Treasurer and Manager of our Deputy Clerk and Manager of Finance. Oh, I'm having one heck of a go tonight. Right? Deputy Clerk, Jessica Smith, and our CIO, Treasurer, Rick Charlebois, and I'm your clerk, Mandy Pearson.
Thank you. Before I turn the draft budget over to Mr. Charlebois, our CAO Treasurer, I just wanted to mention for the public, remember 1% represents $66,000. I want to also mention I'm very proud of the fact that debentures, 6 years ago, we were over $10 million. We will be down to 5.2 by the end of 2025. And just as a reminder, the budget before you tonight does not include the education or the county. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Charlebois, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, everybody. Staff and council had a busy day about a week ago where we did our draft 2025 budget discussions, and we've taken council's direction and any changes, and they've been incorporated in the numbers that you'll see in the presentation tonight. But do we have the presentation on? Oh, oops.
Turn your screen on.
Okay.
Very bottom.
Bottom right.
Bottom left. You were right on your bottom right there. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
You.
Doing too well here.
There it comes.
Oh,
There we go.
we're good. Oh, we had it.
Oh, it's got a loose
We put
connection.
additional money in for IT.
Yeah, I think she can tighten your connections
There
there.
we go.
It's on now.
On now. Let's see if it saves on. Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Jess, Larissa. Next slide, please. Yeah, just quickly our agenda. So we'll go through our what I call the bottom line slide, and then we'll a bit of background financial information. Then we'll talk about the 2025 draft budget for water, then sewer, and then town general, which is not the water, not the sewer, all the other stuff, and then a few closing comments. Next slide, please. Here's just a bit of history. The composite municipal property tax rate. So that's the lower tier, which is us, Petrolia. Upper tier is Lambton County, and also the Ontario education rate. That's in that composite number. Lower tier, which is just Petrolia, what our council has control over, and those are the rates from 2019 to 2024, and then the water and sewer rates for the same period. Next slide, please. This slide I call the bottom line slide. So the staff recommendations for 2025 for the municipal property tax rate, 3%. For water, 0% for the variable rate, and $15 fixed for the monthly rate, and sewer of 3%. We also, as part of our financial policy, give a target for the next 2 years, so 2026 and 2027. You can see them there on the slides. The federal government through the Bank of Canada is getting a grip on inflation, and the bank rate's starting to come down a bit. The bank tries to go between 2 and 3% for inflation. And just wanted to point out the bottom point there. Inflation for last year, the fiscal year, the whole year, was 3.9%. And for the year before was the highest in 40 years at 40%. Or sorry, at 40 years at 6.8%. Next slide, please. This slide here shows our year-end operating surplus deficit from 2012 to 2023. And 2023, at the end of the year, that's our last independent audit. So we've had 11 years of straight surpluses. Next slide, please. This slide here shows our grant approvals from 2012 to 2023. Our town's been very successful with provincial and federal capital grants, as you can see by this slide. Next slide. This here is the Ontario CPI. It's called all items from 2018 to 2023, and it shows the cumulative rate. So for inflation for Ontario, so over those years, it's 21.2%. And for our tax rate, it's 3%. Those 3 years. Okay. Then for the water rates, same cumulative rate for the inflation for the province. And our water rate is 14.6% for the same period. And next page is sewer. And our sewer rates are actually minus 6.6%. And that's because in 17, 18, and 19, we had a 5, 10, and a 5% decrease in our sewer rates. And then, so we're still, in that period, still in a negative cumulative rate. Next slide, please. So the first budget we'll talk about is water. And we, as I keep explaining to, we have sort of 3 companies. One is water, one is water operations, one is our sewer operations, and the other one is all the other stuff, which has quite a scope of what's in there. That's what I call town general. So for water, our revenue, we're estimating $2.8 million. That's with a 0% variable rate increase and a 15 fixed monthly rate, $15. The operating cost, $1.6 million. So our water treatment plant, which is out in Brights Grove, $900,000. Our booster station, which is halfway between here and Brights Grove, $113,000 in operating cost. The water admin collection equipment, $281,000. And water distribution, that's the underground pipes, water pipes, $316,000. That gives us an operating surplus of $1.16 million. Next, we have our capital program. So we have our operator recommended, or in this case, it's Aqua, Ontario Clean Water Association. It's a provincial crown corporation. So that's almost $180,000. The water treatment plant, $20,000. Doman Reservoir, $75,000. The distribution system, $33,000. And unforeseen at 50,000. Our biggest project that we currently have ongoing is the water intake at the water treatment plant in Brights Grove. For 2025, our budget is net $975,000. That's with a $3.7 million expenditure. And then we're also going to get a grant. We have a grant approval for the green stream of 2.7 million or 73% that we'll get on whatever we spend next year. The bottom line is a transfer to the water reserve of just $6,000. We don't anticipate any loans for next year for the water, and our water reserve at the end of 2023 was almost $2 million. We need at least $4 million just for the intake, and then there's a few other projects on the water that we also have to fund from our water rates. There's a few words there about our water treatment plant intake. So it's about a $16.2 million project with a almost $12 million federal and provincial grant. The intake is about 80 years old. Its useful life is about 80 years old. It just has to hang in there for another 2-3 years while we replace the intake. And our intake grant was the joint grant with Innisfail and Don Euphemia and Oil Springs. The other 3 municipalities that are the main users of our water system. Next slide, please. This is now the 2025 sewer budget. So our revenue is 1.9 million. That's a 3% increase. The operating cost 1.7 million. So we have storm sewers at 17,000, sanitary sewers at 819,000. And sanitary is the wastewater part of the sewer system. Then we have our wastewater treatment plant, 856,000. That gives us, you subtract those two numbers, and we end up with a $250,000 operating surplus. And then we have a capital program of almost 170,000. 139,000 of that is the operator recommended capital, and our operator is Jacobs, international big company that does wastewater treatment plants. And we have various items in there, like the SCADA, that's the brains of the plant, 25,000. Disc filter replacement of screens, UV system, some work at pumping stations. And then we also have, it's a new requirement for us, is the consolidated linear infrastructure for engineering work for next year of 30,000. Next slide, please. So the bottom line is a transfer of 82,000 to the sewer reserve. We don't anticipate any loans for our sewer system. And our sewer reserve had a balance of $133,000 at the end of last year, which is low. Our target is to try and have about $500,000 in our water and our sewer reserves. Okay, next slide, please. This slide here is the estimated impact for every $100,000 worth of residential assessment. And that's assessment through MPAC. So on the left-hand side, we have Petrolia, the recommended, with this budget here. So as far right side is the 3%. The county, we made an assumption of 4%. Inflation for 2023 was almost 4%. So I made the assumption that they might come in around 4%. Education, they actually, and it's been like this for several years, number of students we have is reducing. They've been able to keep the education rate the same across the province for the past several years. So the 2024 taxes are the second column from your left. Our proposed taxes are in the middle, and with that assumption about the county. And there's the dollar change and the percent change. So the bottom line is on this would be $50 for every $100,000 worth of MPAC assessment. So the MPAC assessments, they've been frozen since 2020, which really means they're based on the 2016 MPAC assessed values. And the province they're doing a study right now. They probably won't go back to the assessment cycle, which was a 4-year cycle for, well, probably several years from now, I would think. And mentioned we assumed this 4% rate increase for the county, and they'll probably come out with that, I think, in about March or so.
Correct.
Thank you. And the average MPAC assessment for Petrolia is 194,000. We get that from the MPAC information system that we have. So that would mean $97 per year for the average assessed home. Okay, next slide, please. This slide here I've used for probably about 10 years, 11 years, is always ask yourselves where we can fix the problem with duct tape. Most people thought I was just trying to be funny, but I actually used it on the next slide. If you've seen it, this was the mayor and I and Julie, I believe, were at the Women of Excellence. And this lady here, Miriam Gifford, she's the one that canvassed successfully the province. And now Lambton County is getting, I think it's 5 new resident spots for the next 3 years to help us with our doctor shortage. She did a great job. Yeah, I saw her when I walked into the building. Her shoe was broken and she's walking around with one shoe and one bare foot. She was all embarrassed because she had to give a little speech, acceptance speech. So I asked for some tape, and next thing you know, she's walking.
If I can just interject quickly.
Yes.
There was also 200 other witnesses there that saw that as well.
Yes. Yes, that was an excellent event. And next we have the 2025 operating budget for what I call town general. So not the water, not the sewer. We first have up is revenues. These are what are called the non-department Pacific. So it doesn't include departments like Public Works and the VPP where they have revenue. They get recorded later. Okay, the proposed municipal tax rate increase to 3%. That'll give us $6.6 million. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, 1% of our tax rate is equivalent right now to $66,000. Government contributions, $139,000. That is payment in lieu of taxes for government organizations like the OPP and our local hospital. Next, for just over $1 million is our Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. That's our main operating grant from the province. It actually increased $92,000 from 2024. Other revenue, $1.3 million. First one there is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, $584,000 for next year. It's a decrease of $84,000 from our 2024 figure or grant. Then we have the gas tax, which is the federal grant, $197,000. Taxes, tax arrears, interest and penalty, $50,000. Bank interest, $230,000. Blue Water Power dividends and interest, $256,000. As you may know, the town of Petrolia owns part of Blue Water Power. And then a small miscellaneous amount of about $15,000. Next slide, please. Next, we take off the gas tax figure you just saw and the OSIF grant as well. They get transferred to special accounts that will be used for capital projects to help offset the funding requirements. Next, we have the departmental expenditures. These are netted against any revenue that they might generate. First up is the library, heritage, planning and development. As most people are aware, there's a lot of planning development going on in Petrolia right now. A lot of them are at the planning stages. We have the cemetery at $69,000 net deficit. General administration, that's council's expenses, admin staff salaries, insurance, legal, that kind of expenditure. Next, we have facilities maintenance. On the next slide, please. Thank you. $173,000. Protective services. The largest portion of that is the cost of our police services from the OPP. Next, we have the fire department, 390,000. And that 390,000 is just our 60%, as Enniskillen pays for 40% of both operating and capital cost for our joint fire department. Next is Public Works, 1.3 million. That's the salaries, all the roads work, winter control, sanitary collection, street lighting, etc. That's the operating cost for Public Works. Then we have our community center, which is the Petrolia Y, 491,000. The arena, 200 and almost 80,000. Parks and Rec, 528,000. Community events, that's our signature events that we host throughout the year, 172,000. The farmers market, 31,000. Marketing, 168,000. That takes us through all our town operating activities. And then we come to our loans. So next year we'll have 147,000 loans. Those are all the various components of that loan, what it was used for. And then we end up taking all those expenditures off. We end up with a net operating surplus of 1,492,000. And then that all gets transferred to the town working capital reserve to help fund capital projects that are town general projects. So we do not anticipate any loans being required for 2025 for the town general part of the town. And then we have the VPP, and it's operates at an operating balanced budget. So there's no deficit, no surplus. If they get a surplus, they put it towards future deficits of the VPP or towards capital projects. The bottom line for the town general is 0. We can't budget for a deficit and for a surplus. So we budget for a balanced budget. Unlike the federal and provincial governments, they have the authority to budget for a deficit, which has happened for a long time. And next we get into the capital, the town general capital. There's quite a bit here. I'll just highlight the areas. So the arena, that's the arena capital listed there. Cemetery, there's several capital projects in the cemetery. Our community center, the Y, there's a bunch of projects there. Some stuff with the pool and the heating boilers over at the community center. Victoria Hall, this building, pardon me, $50,000 for unforeseen stuff for this building. This building's going to be, 35 years old now? 30?
Close.
Four?
93 was built.
Operated 93? Yeah. Okay, and then the farmers market. There's several projects there. 1993, yeah.
We just didn't want to say anything. We knew the math would start happening.
Yeah, right.
Anybody good at math here?
First one was in
What page are we on?
1889, 74. Yeah, then we have the fire department. And again, the fire department, this is just the 60% that belongs to the town of Petrolia. 40% is paid for by Enniskillen. First one up is a tanker. That's the big water truck for the fire service. And that's a partial payment of 138,000. And we'll pay the rest of it off in 2026 when the truck arrives. Then we have some general government capital expenditures, like replacing some of our aged computers, so records, digitization software, and some security camera upgrades. Then we have our library. In our library, we were given a major donation a few years back that helps to cover a lot of the capital costs for our libraries. Next slide, please. There we go. And then we have Parks and Rec. There's several things listed there. And then Public Works. The main thing for Public Works is the new replacement of a dump truck, a 2011 dump truck. Rehearsal hall, security system, roads work. The major roads work is some what they call shave and pave, fixing the top layer of some of our roads on and First Ave. And also looking at Pettibone, to fix up Pettibone. And there's also, next is the sidewalk program. Council approved about a 10-year or multi-year program to address sidewalks in town. And this is next year's program. And then I mentioned before about the gas tax and the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, pardon me, and how they help with our capital program. So that's the capital grant used to offset that. Okay, and then next slide, we have our Scotiabank building that the town purchased from Scotiabank when it closed. And there's some capital expenditures there. And the last is Victoria Hall, some more detailed capital work that we have to do. And the total net capital is 1.8 million. The gross capital without any special funding is 3.2 million. And our special funding, most of it is the gas tax and the OSIF grants, is 1.4 million. Okay, next slide, please. This slide here is one of the first slides at the front end. So our draft 2025 budget's recommending 3% increase to the Petrolia lower tier tax rate, water 0% for the variable rate, and $15 for the fixed water rate, and sewer at 3%. Next slide, please. Like almost all municipalities, the town of Petrolia is a very capital intense organization. We have over 360 million worth of assets at replacement cost. These assets are critical to the town maintaining its level of service to residents, such as safe drinking water and our roads, etc. Asset management plans, they've been mandatory for about 10 years now, and to the point where we can't even apply for a capital grant with the federal provincial government unless we have an asset management plan. And we also have to ensure that it's current, and the grant that we're applying for is in our plan as a requirement or as a priority. The town put together several years ago a long-term capital and financial plan, which helps us with many things. And this draft budget will go to council on the 9th of December next week, seeking approval. The last slide, please. Yeah, this is a good expression to live with. It's budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. We try to be proactive, as proactive as we can, and I'll be glad to take any questions or comments.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Charlebois. We'll go through the process. I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson, do we have anyone registered or any correspondence for tonight?
I received nothing, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'll open it to the public. Any member of the public or anyone here wishing to address council regarding the budget only? And as usual, please state your address and your name, please, for the record.
Sherry, ERRY, 287 Evergreen Trail. I was just looking over this. It's a lot to digest. But I was wondering, I could be missing something, but we're also anticipating additional expenses then for the Scotiabank building in regards to custodian services as well as maintenance and repair. Is that correct?
Mr. Charlebois, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, that's correct, Sherry. It's in the budget here, and so there's the capital costs that was spelled out in my little presentation here, and in the operating cost, we've estimated the operating cost for the year to operate Scotiabank, and we've also estimated how much we think we can get from rent revenue.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, whoever's on the committee, what is the purpose of putting the wall up? Like, what are we hoping to obtain in regards to revenue?
Okay, thank you. Would you like to answer that?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Charlebois.
One of the chairs.
No, you can go ahead.
Go ahead. So, sorry, the question was how much?
Well, what we're anticipating to use it for now that we're building a wall and
Yeah.
putting in a washroom.
Yeah. So the committee looked at quite a few options, including like a lot of feedback from the public. We had an open house as well and online feedback. And so the option that we recommended to council and council accepted on the 26th of November
Mhm.
is the front half will be for retail or commercial, and that'll be rented out. And then there's that wall that will be put in with a door in the middle, safety fire door. And the back half will be used for a community meeting place of some service club or whatever wants to use it, or and also a place to have to display Petrolia memorabilia. Because right now there's a whole bunch of stuff sitting in closets and stuff that doesn't have a place to be properly displayed. That's what, yeah, and then there'll be a washroom. So it's the wall and a washroom on the back half.
So the
Just before we go any further, Deputy Mayor Field, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Rick covered it off pretty good. The committee looked at renting the front, which would help absorb a lot of the costs. And the back half was definitely a request for additional space, meeting areas for just about any organization. And like Rick said, a place that we can put some of our artifacts, same way we have display cabinets in here and art on the wall. So.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Field. Mrs. Hamilton, continue on.
Okay, so then when I got looking at, and I did watch the meeting, I thank everyone for the long days put in. I watched all the segments. It was really great, although the camera was bouncing around a lot, so kind of.
Oh, yeah, I think the cameras automatically follow the voice, I think.
Right, it moves whoever's
Yeah.
speaking.
But I got looking at page 31 of the 83, and it lists all the Family Day, Pizza Fest, Canada Day, Barn Dance. Is there a separate location, Mr. Mayor, where I would find the revenue and expenditures involved in the 150th celebrations? Is that incorporated into this year-to-date stuff?
I believe it is. I'll ask Mr. Charlebois, our treasurer, to speak to that.
Yes, through your worship. It's not included in any of this yet, Sherry.
Okay.
Come whatever, February, March, whenever we're done the 150, it'll all be summarized up. Because the one, as you know, the 150 was quite a large celebration. So there's a lot. I don't know if you've counted the activities up for the 150, but there was a lot. So we'll put that all together and bring that to council probably February or March by the time we get all the bills in and figure everything out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's part of our 2024 budget, though. Is that correct? What we're talking about here is the 2025.
Yeah, this is 2025 budget. Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. It was just, you had listed in here all the year-to-date totals for 2024. And I didn't see a year-to-date total for the 150th. So that's why I wondered if
Right.
that was something
Yeah.
forthcoming or not. But you were very transparent in providing those actual year-to-date totals for 2024. And I did notice, and I'm sure that it makes sense to everybody else, but I know that February the 20th, 43,852.50 was provided in funding for equipment for the Y. Are we funding more equipment above and beyond this then in next year? Is this something for the Y we?
Mr. Charlebois, I
Yeah.
believe that's correct. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Where are you getting that number from, Sherry?
This would be the Town of Corporation, February 20th, 2024, YMCA fitness equipment. I think the actual recommendation that Council of the Town of Petrolia endorses the report of the Director of Parks and Recreation Facilities dated February the 20th, 2024 regarding quotes resulted from replacement fitness equipment at the YMCA Petrolia, and that Council approves the equipment purchase from FDF Group in the amount of $43,853.50 plus HST. So
Yeah, correct. So for 2024, that was the capital replenishment of the fitness equipment at the Y.
So we do this once a year?
Yeah, well, the Y, I forget how many municipalities that they support, but I think it's like 15. So they have a purchasing group. Their headquarters is in London. So once we get our budget approved, then we go to the Y, and the Y will use their purchasing group, and they put together all the other municipalities so they can get a better price, and they go out and tender it for us and then come back with the results.
Deputy Mayor Field, go ahead.
If I can through
Yeah.
you, I think maybe what you're saying is we spent 43,000 last year and we have money in it for this year. We didn't replace everything that needed to be replaced last year. I think it was a gradual thing.
That's correct.
And to answer your question, I don't believe that we're paying $43,000 every year to replace. It had been a number of years before we had replaced anything in there. So it was
That's correct.
more of a catch up. So.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, trying to get a grasp on the budget and understand thoroughly what you're trying to accomplish, I took time to read through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was presented to you in 2020 to see how that related to what Parks and Rec's expenses and future requirements would be. One of the items that I can't find on here under any of the park expenditures or what's going to be addressed in Parks and Rec is anything involving a dog park. In the master plan, it did say something about that. Now, it could be under something else in here, but I didn't see it.
I'll try and speak to that. I don't think there's anything in there, but I think that's something Parks and Recreation has been discussing over the last few years, and I'm not sure if it's come back recently or not. Mrs. Bullock, can you speak to that?
Yes, Your Worship. So we have been discussing that. Location always ends up being the big factor that we're still trying to find a solid home for a dog park. So the committee's still definitely looking at that, but it's just taking some time to find a good location for it.
Thank you. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Charlebois, there is not anything in this budget to
No,
go towards dog park.
I see Bridgeview Park, a pavilion, but I did not see something specific for that issue, which was brought up in 2020. So I just wasn't sure if I missed it or not.
No,
So it's
no,
still
that's correct.
undergoing
Yeah, yes,
4 years in. Okay.
yes.
All right. I think that's all the clarification I needed. I appreciate the effort that goes into doing this. I'm just wondering when it comes to the Scotiabank, if that was a good expenditure and if it's costing the taxpayers a lot of money to have that bank on the books. Perhaps those funds could have been used for one of the other issues that
No,
we have in town. So that was just my concern. I wanted to clarify that. I'll be interested at the end of next year to see how the bank proceedings actually go forward, to see what we make, lose, or otherwise on that acquisition. So thank you for clarifying that.
thank you.
Appreciate
And
it.
we also are looking forward to what happens with the bank within a year as well. So we'll see what happens at this time next year, how the bank has made out, as you said.
I knew it had sat, Mr. Mayor, from July till now, basically virtually just housing that ATM. So I know we're 6 months behind the ball already. We're going to be playing catch up in 2025 for sure.
I think just to add, I know that they've been really busy with the 150 committee, so it did take a little longer than I hoped, but there were far more suggestions that came in on what to do with that bank, I think, than what we thought ever would be. So, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you
for
very
coming
much.
to address this committee. Anyone else wishing to address this budget session? I'll ask council if you have, and again, any questions or clarification only. I guess with that, I'll wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll declare this public meeting closed. Thank you, everyone. Excellent. That was good.